This E3 coverage is brought to you by Squarespace. Squarespace is the all-in-one platform that makes it fast and easy to create a professional website, blog, portfolio, and online store. For a free trial and 10% off your first purchase on new accounts, head on over to squarespace.com and use offer code GAMEBREAKER6.
Hey guys, Troy here with GameBreaker TV, and today we've got a first look sneak peek at the new dungeon called Aetherblade Retreat, which is coming to Guild Wars 2 and the next part of the Dragon Bash event, scheduled to kick off on June 25th. Now this dungeon is a home to the Aetherblades, which are a group of sky pirates, and while the faction is going to be a permanent addition to Guild Wars 2, this dungeon's only going to be temporary, so once this goes live, you definitely want to get in and be able to experience this before it's gone. So the Aetherblades are a new faction coming to Guild Wars 2, and they're sort of a steampunkish styled sky pirate faction, and they're responsible for the assassination of the Char representative during the effigy ceremony that you saw earlier on in the Dragon Bash event. So as you make your way through that storyline, eventually you and 4 of your closest friends are going to need to venture into the Aetherblade Retreat and take out the enemies in their own home lair. Now the entrance to this dungeon is actually inside of Lion's Arch. So this is a sneaky group of sky pirates. They've managed to set up a base of operations inside the major hub city of the game. So obviously we can't let this stand. We need to go in, clear these guys out, and take care of the people who are responsible for the assassination of the Char representative. I was fortunate enough last week to be in a group that got a sneak peek of the new dungeon, and the group I'm running with here consists of developers and some other media members. So we're probably not the most hardcore group you've ever seen of Guild Wars 2 dungeon runners, but we had a good time and it was a really enjoyable experience. So we're going to go through, show you some of the footage from this, and kind of hit the highlights of the dungeon. We're not going to show the entire run because we were in there for quite a while, so we're just going to show you some of the best stuff. As far as difficulty level goes, the developers wanted this dungeon to be in the upper echelon as far as difficulty and the skill required by players in order to complete it. The boss fights have a lot of really neat mechanics, but can also get pretty intense and takes a lot of concentration to make sure you're doing the right thing and kind of know what's coming up next. Even the trash mobs for the Aetherblade have individual powers that kind of interact with each other a lot more than previous dungeons, and each one of these Aetherblades can really help each other out and really put on a nasty show. Now, even though the Aetherblade are a group of sky pirates, apparently they like to make their base inside of a deep, dark, dank cave. And the environment inside this cave is really awesome, especially in a couple places that we'll point out later in the video. The ambiance is just spectacular, and the developers have done a great job of really making this place feel real dark and ominous. Also, as you make your way through the dungeon and you start taking on different trash mobs, you're going to encounter certain abilities and certain things inside the dungeon itself that kind of teach you the mechanics of the upcoming boss fights. So pay attention to the abilities that the mobs are using and sort of the things that are going on in the environment, because they're definitely going to be very important later on when you're facing some of the big fights. Now, the first example of paying attention to the fights and things that are going on in the environment around you comes up very early in the dungeon here. This is after the second trash mob pull, I believe. You'll see we run into these energy walls that are shooting streaks of lightning across the hallway here. Now, as some of my compatriots found out a little later here, you definitely don't want to run into these walls. They pretty much equal insta-death. And this is the first real example of, hey, this is bad stuff. Don't get in this no matter where you see it at. Now, while the first time you see this in a big major fight, it isn't set up the exact same way. The walls themselves and what they do is very recognizable the moment it begins, and you're definitely like, oh crap, stay away from that. And as you can see here, if you didn't learn your lesson through the first series of walls, there's a second series of walls to make sure that you figure out, hey, dummy, don't run into those. Another thing you may have noticed is that the game is keeping us in a pretty confined area, a lot of being on walkways and fighting in small areas, and this is kind of preparing us for what's to come as well. While the rooms the boss encounters themselves are in are fairly good sized, we are going to kind of end up being restricted to certain areas of that room and kind of have to work within small confines, despite the fact that we're in pretty good sized rooms. So be prepared for a lot of movement in these fights, but you're going to be confined as far as the amount of area that you can use to move around and stay safe in. Now, before we even get to the first boss, we're going to run into this room, which is actually going to teach you some things and set you up, prepare you to fight the final boss in the dungeon and show you some sort of the smaller version of the mechanics that are going to be present in that fight. Now, this room was pretty intense. There were a lot of guys, and then there was the mechanic that you'll see right now of the cannons firing down at you that you have to avoid. And like I said, this is pretty small scale compared to what you're going to see in the final boss fight. But when we first walked into this room, our developer didn't necessarily tell us that this was or wasn't a boss fight. So I don't know about the other guys in my group, but I was under the impression that this was kind of a boss fight that was happening because it was pretty intense. Not necessarily this part, but once we had to step up in the room a little bit, things got a little hairy. But as I said, this dungeon is supposed to be more difficult than some of the others and be one of the more difficult dungeons they've put out. They like doing that during the event dungeons, is making them a little more difficult, ramping up the difficulty, and making you really have to work for your rewards. As a matter of fact, this dungeon is difficult enough that they felt it was worth giving you a gold at the end of it as a reward. So as I said, the major mechanic you're supposed to be picking up here is dealing with the cannons that are raining down. But again, this is more just to kind of show you the animations and the effects, and isn't really exactly how it looks or how it works in the boss fight that you're going to utilize it in. But you're going to be familiar and not going to be like, oh my god, what is that? What's happening? So after you clear this room out, it's time to put some of the knowledge you've acquired by killing mobs and encountering things to the test with the first boss fight. Now, once you start this fight, you're going to get a little bit of a cutscene, cinematic sort of deal, where the guy talks a little bit. But also, you're going to get a few seconds to kind of take a look around the room. And you're definitely going to want to do that and pay attention to some of the things that are laid out here, because you're going to need to utilize pretty much everything in these rooms. Pay special attention to the crates and the barrels, because they're going to be very important for this fight.
Very well.
So you get brought in the room, and as I said, you've got a few seconds here to kind of run around, take a look at the room, and pay attention to what's going on. As soon as somebody activates this guy, it is go time, and pretty much from the moment he starts until the moment this fight is over, you're going to be running for your life and trying your best to survive. And I believe somebody talks to him now, and just like that, it goes down. Now, as with most boss encounters, this thing happens in a few different phases. And the first one here, as you can see, we've got some other guys running around that we need to take down, as well as the big boss in the middle using his flamethrower. You can avoid those by ducking behind the crates and some of the other things that are in the room and dodge rolling out of things. You definitely do not want to take a full frontal from this guy's flamethrower. It is nasty. It does a ton of damage. As you can see, every time he even remotely hits me with that thing, it chunks me for like a quarter of my health every time. If I don't get out of it, I'm as good as dead. Now here again, we're not going to show the entire fight, but I want to show you a little bit of each phase so you can get a feel for what's going on here, because this is a pretty nasty fight, but this one is a lot of fun. This is probably the most fun encounter that I had in the dungeon. It really reminds me a lot of some Wrath of the Lich King fights in WoW, and there were some mechanics in here, as you'll see in a few minutes, that just brought back a lot of raiding memories and just was a lot of fun for me. A lot of movement. I always enjoy fights with lots of movement. So once you kill all the dudes in the room and whittle the boss down far enough, he's going to go hide in the middle and shield himself, and next thing you know, he's shooting out walls of electricity. I believe you've seen this before. The walls themselves are recognizable, but of course the mechanic of how they're being used is slightly different, but it was definitely enough early on for you to know, hey, this crap is bad, let's get the heck out of it. Now there's a tall wall and a short wall, and for the short wall, you can jump up on the crates and the wall will go under you and you don't have to worry about that one, but there's a taller wall that you have to keep circling the room to stay out of. And also, as you can see, we've got a couple of golems here that we're having to deal with as well, and they do a crap ton of damage and they can knock you around and really ruin your day. And also, when they get hit by the wall, they can have specific effects like a pull or extra damage that just really makes things terrible to deal with. This is a super nasty fight, but it is a whole lot of fun. If you enjoy moving and shooting and kiting and just kind of avoiding environmental things as well as taking out enemies, you're really going to like this fight. And the room itself is pretty awesome, which makes the environment even more fun and just improves the whole fight overall. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm pretty sure everybody in our group just really just enjoyed doing this fight. Now, while that was definitely my favorite fight in the dungeon, now I want to show you what was definitely my favorite little area in the dungeon. And it's not a boss fight, but it was just spectacular and really awesome and kind of intense walking across this bridge. This is part of what makes Guild Wars 2 such a great game. Just look at the aesthetics, the visuals, the intensity of this area. The ocean's swelling. There's a shipwreck off the side. We're like in a little dungeon cove, and the ocean is just mad at the world. And it's just super intense and super awesome, and it really felt spectacular just walking across that bridge, and I was really worried that the ocean was just going to swell up and sweep me away, and it was just really awesome stuff. So after you wind and make your way through the rest of the dungeon, you finally come to the final boss fight, and this is where we encounter... In this last fight, we get to avenge the death of the Char representative that was assassinated at the effigy burning ceremony, and we also get to meet a couple of important people in the Sky Pirates and take them out. Now the big dude over to the side has a freaking shoulder cannon that he's going to use to try to wreck our faces. And basically in this fight, you're kind of kiting around the female who is the main boss, and this guy's going to stand off to the side and shoot cannons at you. Now note that if you kill the guy with the cannon first, he's just going to respawn and you're going to deal with him again. So you want to spend your time taking out the main chick. Now she also has a shield that decreases the amount of damage she takes, but if you can kite her into one of the cannon blasts, that will reduce the shield, which will increase the amount of damage that you do to her. So you're going to spend this fight slowly whittling her health down and trying to get her down. Now obviously the name of the game here is to get the main boss's health down to 0 and then take out the guy on the side, but as you're probably familiar with boss fights because you've been playing MMOs for a while, I'm sure, is as you take this main boss's health down, things are just going to get nasty. At certain percentages of health, stuff gets real and the crap hits the fan. And I do mean the crap hits the fan. As you can see, we've got her around 50%, and all of a sudden, we're not just dodging a few cannon shots from this Horic guy over here on the side and his big bad shoulder cannon. All of a sudden, it's a freaking cannon barrage. Now there are supposed to be discernible patterns here. You're supposed to be able to tell where things are going to land and where you need to go to next. But I'm going to tell you right now, when you're actually in the fight, especially the first couple of times you see it, this is freaking intense. And I'm pretty sure I go down here in just a moment because I stay safe for a few minutes, but once, for just a moment, I stopped concentrating and kind of lost track of where I was supposed to be going. I was stuck and I just got pummeled by these cannons. So we'll go ahead and cut to the next scene while I still look like I know what I'm doing before I fall flat on my face like some kind of scrub noob. But that's basically the gist of that fight, is kite the boss around, whittle her health down, and then deal with the cannon barrage. I believe it happens twice, and the second time it lasts longer than it does the first time. So the first time is just practice. The second time is the real deal, and I'm telling you, it ain't no joke, and it's pretty nasty. So this is the final boss fight of the dungeon, and at the end here we get a bag of coins that contains 1 whole gold as a reward for running in this dungeon. And one thing to note here, we didn't realize it when it happened, but as soon as the Horic guy with the shoulder cannon goes down, he drops a little cannon that you can pick up and take over to this ship and take out an escaping pirate ship, and it's on a timer, so you need to grab it up and run right over here and do it kind of like as a bonus stage, and we missed it and didn't get it. But that's something you definitely want to keep in mind. When this fight is over, you're not necessarily done doing what you need to do, and if you want to get the bonus stage, you need to pick that up and run across that little bridge to that ship. But that pretty much wraps it up for this first look at the Aetherblade Retreat Dungeon coming to Guild Wars 2 on June 25th. And we do have more Dragon Bash event sneak peeks of things that are coming up in the coming days, so definitely stay tuned right here on GameBreaker TV for that. Thanks for watching, guys, and we'll see you here in just a few days.